Hi there. I wanted to talk about my new book that's actually not a new book. It's a book that I wrote, I don't know, about 15 years ago, but I republished it and I gave it a new cover and tidied it up. Here it is. It's called The Librarian's Secret. And you might have read it a long time ago when it was called The Rhymes Library. It was a book that took me about 10 years to write. The interesting thing about this story is while the story is compelling, it's not nearly as fascinating as the real story, the true story. So when I was a kid, there was a family that lived down the street, and they had a daughter, and her name was Lindy. And she was my babysitter. She was my brother's age, so about 10 years older than me. And she lived in this house. Try to see if I can get this to go away. She lived in the, yeah. I'm trying to get my keyboard to go down. Anyway, she lived in this house, and it was down at the end of the street from where I lived. And when I wrote The Rhymes Library, or The Librarian's Secret, as it is now called, this house was the inspiration for this story. So this house was always a little bit scary to me. For one thing, it was decorated in this French provincial style, and it had all of the furniture was like etched in gold, and it was very busy, and it was very fussy, and and I don't know why I thought that was a little bit scary, but I think that what made it even scarier was I was not allowed to watch the show Dark Shadows. If you lived in the 60s or 70s, you were probably familiar with the television show Dark Shadows, and it was about vampires. And at my own home, I was not allowed to watch Dark Shadows, but the babysitter didn't know that I wasn't allowed to watch Dark Shadows, and so I would always watch it when I was there, and then have nightmares at night. And anyway, so fast forward many, many, many years later, and I am writing my second novel, and it took me 10 years to write. It took me a really long time to write this novel, but I was a very busy person. I had 6 children. I was very busy. And it took me a long time to write, but I wrote it. And the premise of the story is that our librarian Blair, she's a young adult, and she was raised by her Aunt Charlotte, by her great Aunt Charlotte. And Aunt Charlotte is suffering from dementia. And they keep her in an assisted living. And Aunt Charlotte is very clever, and she's breaking out of her assisted living. She's escaping from her assisted living, and the police are tired of looking for her. They're tired of her shenanigans. Anyway, so on a stormy night, or a stormy day, actually, evening, 5 o'clock in the evening, Blair, there's a storm, and the storm knocks out the power. So Blair has to go downstairs to the basement to manually turn off the furnace. When I was growing up, we had a furnace that had to be manually turned off and on, and it was in our basement. So in my novel, Blair has to go down to the basement and manually turn off the furnace. And also in the Pacific Northwest, when I was growing up, we would frequently have power outages. It was not uncommon at all. There were lots of trees, and the trees would knock down power lines, and it was a regular occurrence. Anyway, so Blair goes down to the library, where she finds her dead Aunt Charlotte's body. And she also finds a kitten, but that's later. Actually, she finds kittens first. Anyway, there's a kitten, and there's a hero. And it takes Blair some time to fetch the police because of the storm and because of the kitten. It takes her some time to fetch the police. But when she finally gets the police to come to the basement, Aunt Charlotte's body is gone. And without a body, they aren't going to go looking for Charlotte, even though Blair knows that Charlotte is dead. Okay, that's the book. But this is where things get really interesting. I personally don't believe in coincidences because I'm a person of faith, and I don't believe there are coincidences. But coincidentally, my babysitter's granddaughter. So here I'm living in California, thousands of miles away from my hometown in Arlington, Washington, where my book is set in the fictional town of Rose Harbor. And that house that I showed you the picture of, which was my inspiration for the library. So my babysitter who lived in that house where I was allowed to watch Dark Shadows, which was kind of scary. So my babysitter's granddaughter now lives in the same town where I live here in California, and we attend the same church. And she told me years after the book was written that her grandmother, who had been my babysitter, died from a rare form of dementia at the age of 58. Isn't that crazy? I didn't know that Lindy, the babysitter, suffered from mental illness, just like my character who lived in that same house. So that's the inspiration. That's the real life story. But I can't say it was an inspiration because I didn't know. I didn't know when I had written the book. But that was kind of the inspiration. And stay tuned, because I am going to read the opening chapter of The Librarian's Secret and post it on YouTube. So thanks for joining me today.